to be between you and your closest friend, or you and a complete stranger at the supermarket, for example. So dyad simply means two. Sometimes books will define interpersonal communication as communication between two people, but that's not really an accurate definition. So between any two people is dyadic. We'll talk more about what interpersonal is in a few minutes. Okay. Now for the impersonal versus interpersonal. I've drawn this sort of continuum on the board because I kept forgetting to put the slide in. And what you'll see here is a range from the kind of communication from impersonal to interpersonal and what kind of information we have in our heads that allows us to communicate in those situations. So for example, impersonal communication relies on cultural data. All that means is this. When we're talking with someone we don't really know, we rely on the norms and rules in our culture to converse with them. So if you go into a restaurant, it's almost like a script we follow. You walk in, the host or hostess usually asks you, or says something like, welcome to wherever. They ask you how many people in your party, and you respond, where do you like to sit, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a script we follow when we're in a situation that we have to interact with someone we don't know, based on the context, the culture. If you find yourself talking to a stranger on the street or passing someone, usually it's just hi, how are you? So we follow scripts with people that we don't know. That's impersonal communication. As we move towards the middle of this continuum, we rely on what's known as social data. And usually this has to do with being a member of a group. So, in your class this semester, you were put into groups, and when you first got into those groups, you didn't know each other very well, if at all. But you did know something about each other. You knew that you were in the same class, you knew that you were going to be working in a group together, you knew that you were in college, you knew that you were in Pittsburgh, so there were some things that you already knew. So your communication is probably based, in the beginning, on the things you have in common. You might talk about what your majors are, etc. But you already know you have some things in common, so that gives you a starting point that's further along than the impersonal communication. So you could call that more personal. Okay? As you move to the right end of the continuum, then we're talking about interpersonal communication. And that style is based on psychological data. All that means is this. If you are close to someone, whether it be a friend, a family member, a significant other, you have a lot of information about that person that makes it possible for you to communicate on many levels. You don't have to rely on a script. You can just talk to them about whatever you want to talk to them about. You don't have to stick with a very stiff kind of interaction. So the more you know someone, the closer you are to them, the more spontaneous the communication can be, and the more interpersonal it is. All right, so that's interpersonal communication is that which happens between people who are relatively close. Friends, family members, significant others, etc. So that's the distinction. Forgiveness. It's almost the end of the semester, so you've done pretty well. Why do we have relationships? These are very obvious reasons, but let's go over it. First of all, to avoid loneliness. It's the only game in town. I mean, you're going to have relationships with other people at a variety of levels. Not everybody you have a relationship with is going to be an extremely close relationship, but we need sort of a variety of levels of relationships. We need human interaction. I spend all day interacting with other people, as many of you probably do. At the end of the day, I'm pretty much done with that. I can just stop talking by the end of the day. If I were to hide away for 4 or 5 days, which is kind of fun, and not talk to people, I would enjoy that for a few days, and then I'd probably have to say, I gotta go see somebody, I gotta talk to somebody. Eventually, we all need human interaction. Even Thoreau, who wrote Walden, supposedly lived in the woods for, I don't know, 6 months or a couple of years, I don't remember. He even walked into town to talk to people, to get supplies. His family lived right down the road and he went to visit them frequently. He didn't just wall himself up in his house for 6 months and not speak to anyone. We have relationships so we can learn about ourselves. When we talk about what we think and what we feel, sometimes we don't know those things until we say them out loud. And so that allows us to learn more about ourselves. Finally, we need somebody to share our ideas and opinions and feelings with, someone to get feedback from, someone to say, hey, that makes sense, or you're not crazy, or yes, I get what you're saying. So these are the reasons we have relationships. Obviously, this is all of them. Now, this is the point at which I want you to reach back into your past and think of a relationship of yours that ended. It would be best if it were a romantic relationship because this model fits that best, but it could work for a friendship as well. As we go through these stages, notice that each stage is marked by certain kinds of communication. So the communication at one stage moves you to the next stage. I'm going to display all 5 of these stages and then just go through one by one. The first stage is initiating, and that's simply the introduction between you and the other person. Sometimes those introductions are memorable, sometimes they're not. Sometimes you don't really meet someone formally, you just suddenly know them because they've been in your class and you know their name, but you've never had a formal introduction. I had an introduction that always has stuck in my head. I was a freshman in college, my first week on campus. I was at the student union, and there was a group of people sitting at another table. One young man looked at me, I looked back at him, and he said, "Are you married?" That was his introduction. I said, "No." Very bright, right? Basically, I said, "I don't even know you." But we started a conversation, and we became lifelong friends. We never dated. It wasn't a romantic relationship, but the best of friends. And I won't ever forget that introduction. At an initiating stage, introduction lasts just seconds or even minutes. But basically, that stage is over once you know who that person is. The next stage is exploratory or experimenting. And that's where small talk occurs. I think small talk is really boring for the most part, but we have to do it. We have to get through that stage so that we can move to the next stage. So unless we talk about things like where are you from, or what's your major, what do you do for a living, we have to get that stuff out of the way, and then we can move to more interesting things. But that's a requirement. The third stage is called intensification. If you are in a romantic relationship, this is the stage at which you start to self-disclose. And remember, self-disclosure is the sharing of private information that that person probably couldn't find out somewhere else. So this is where you start sharing that information about yourself to the other person and vice versa. And this supposedly builds some amount of closeness. The next stage is called, it's a stable stage, but it's also called integrating. Integrating is when you stop using words like I, me, mine, and start using words like you, ours, us, etc. We. It becomes a way of saying we are a pair, so you start using terms that indicate that you're a pair. The next stage is bonding. And this is a formal, I don't mean to stand up in front of a group and say this, but it's kind of a formal declaration that you are now a pair. It could be moving in together, it could be going on vacation together, it could be getting engaged. The point is, it's some declaration that this relationship has moved to the next level. And so you talk about yourselves as a pair, as a couple, and people also recognize you in that way and talk about you in the same way. So these are the first 5 stages of getting together. And if I get this in there we go. What stage do you think this couple is in? They look happy enough. Or, yeah, it could be anywhere the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. We don't know for sure, but that's a good guess. 3rd, 4th, and 5th. They look pretty happy. Okay. The stages of breaking apart are nearly as much fun as those of getting together. The first stage of breaking apart is called differentiating. And that's when you start to notice that the differences between the two of you are problematic. If they were cute before, oh, that's cute that he does this way, and now it's a pain in the neck. I wish you would pick up your clothes, or whatever it is. Or you start saying things like, I don't like your friends instead of our friend. I don't like your music when you play it so loud instead of our music. Turn off my stereo instead of our stereo or the stereo. There's a lot of conflict in this stage, and it may be that neither person really knows what's going on or hasn't really defined yet what they're feeling. They just know they're not as happy as they were before, and there's some conflict going on, and things are feeling uncomfortable. And a lot of things can influence this. I mean, a lot of things. Circumscribing, the next stage, is when the two of you kind of get tired of the conflict, and so you stop fighting, but you're also not talking about anything controversial, anything important. Your conversation is very surface level. Did you happen to pick up the mail? Yeah, I got it. Or could you take out the trash? Sure. Things like that, instead of deep level conversation. But you're not quite ready yet to say, this is over, because maybe you don't know yet that it's over. Maybe you don't want it to be over. But in any case, you're not ready to make that declaration yet. Nobody else knows that you're having these problems at this point, probably. You may go out in public as a couple and everybody thinks that you're behaving just the same and they don't even have a clue. But the minute you get home, you're back to this very cold, very walking on eggshells, don't want to fight kind of thing. Stagnating is simply that. You're not moving forward. You're not moving back, you're still not talking about anything, you haven't made any decisions either in your head or out loud about what's going to happen to this relationship, but you're just hanging in there. And you need to keep in mind that other than the first stage, initiating, where you're introduced to someone, these other stages can last anywhere from days to years, literally. If you've ever heard about people getting divorced after 25 years of marriage, and then being surprised, it probably wasn't as sudden as it appears. Probably they were stagnating for many years. And sometimes what happens is these people wait until the kids go off to college or move out of the house, and then suddenly it's okay to break up. And the kids are just completely surprised. They had no idea, or maybe they had some idea, but they weren't sure, and are still surprised that the relationship is broken up. But stagnating means it just stays in that stage for however long it stays. Avoiding simply is you're actually physically avoiding each other. If you live in the same house or apartment, you may find yourself spending your time in different rooms. If you don't live together, you may find yourself making sure their phone calls go right to voicemail, or not answering their emails. Or avoiding, you look on Facebook and it no longer says in a relationship. It might say something like it's complicated or nothing at all. That's the time to have a conversation. The final stage, terminating, is when the relationship actually ends. I hate that word. It makes me think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator. Not a pleasant thought. And terminating can happen very suddenly, as in, I'm done, I'm out of here, or it can happen slowly. So if you've gone through all these stages and it's taken a really long time, then the relationship ends where you have a talk and you want to move on, et cetera, that's more of a passing away. It's died slowly and it's time to end it. Keep in mind that these stages, while they typically go in order, it is possible to skip stages, though typically if the relationship's going to last, you have to go back. So you've heard stories about people who meet and 6 weeks later they're married. You think, wow, they went through those stages fast. Yes and no. They went through them fast, but in order for the relationship to be successful, they're going to have to go back. Pick up the information they don't know about each other because they can't know everything in 6 weeks. They may think they do, but they don't. If these relationships last, and many do, you know, they met, were married in 6 weeks, and they've been married 30 years. That's great. That's because they took the time to get to know each other and liked what they got to know. Or sometimes you go from meeting someone in a bar and waking up up the next morning, right? Next to them. That's where you go from initiating to intensification. And so suddenly, if that relationship is going to be an ongoing one, you're going to have to kind of start all over. Go back and get the information and get to know each other. Terminating can also happen by sudden death. Sudden death can happen two ways. An actual death of a partner, physical death, and that can happen at any stage. I mean, you could be going along great and somebody dies. Or it can happen metaphorically or figuratively. So let's say you're in the intensification stage or even the bonding stage. You feel like you're really happy, and then you find out your partner has cheated on you or is cheating on you, and that may end in, I'm out of here, I'm done with that, it's over. Now, there are other relationship rules that, if broken, could end a relationship quickly like that. Can you think of any examples of other rules besides cheating? Things that you wouldn't like to see?
Lying in general.
Lying in general? What was that? Oh, serial killer, yeah. That goes without saying. Although at least you want to hear their side of the story, right? You know. Perhaps someone stole money from you. Or, yeah, really, there are a lot of things people could do that could suddenly end a relationship. So, while it takes two people to make a relationship grow and work, one person can decide to end it with or without your permission, or with or without their permission. Okay, you know what I mean? You don't have to give permission, and they don't have to give permission. One or the other can end it. And that's where it gets difficult. Okay, what this model doesn't do very well is talk about what happens during the stable stages. Obviously, a relationship can stay stable for many years and not ever break up until somebody dies. Or something else that could happen is you could go through some of these stages near the end here and decide, hey, we really want to save this. So you go back and decide, how are we going to put this back together? How are we going to make this work? So, there are many ways to do it. Oh wait, I forgot. What stage is this couple in? Avoiding, probably. Anyway, it's not a good stage, right? So, if you decide to go back and repair the relationship, and here we go with a fancy acronym. People sit around for hours trying to come up with these things, I think. All right, first, you have to recognize the problems. And what that means is not just know it in your head, you have to actually talk about it. You have to say, we have a problem, and this is what I think it is. And the other person has to say, yes, I agree, we have a problem. Then you have to figure out how to manage the conflict. My suggestion at this stage is that you get a third party to help you out. Not a friend or a relative, because it's hard for them to be neutral. Go to a minister, a priest, a counselor. I mean, ministers and priests are free, but you go to a counselor, you may feel like you want to do that. The point is, that person has no vested interest in how things turn out, so they're going to be more likely to be honest with you and offer good advice because they're also trained to do that. So I would sit down and try to talk to somebody to get your problem sort of laid out, and some strategies for managing the conflict, and also strategies for solutions, how to come up with solutions. Once you've decided on possible solutions, the next part, which is kind of hard, is to be supportive of your partner, to affirm them. If you're ticked off at them or not liking them a whole lot right now, and we know we can love somebody and not always like them every minute, you know, it's possible. But if you're not liking them right now, then it's going to be hard to be supportive, but you have to force yourself to do it. So if one of the problems you're having is that you're overly critical of each other, instead of saying, take out the trash, would you? You said you were going to. Instead of saying that, you might say, would you mind taking out the trash? Force yourself to be supportive. Force yourself to be pleasant. Treat the person like you would treat a stranger. I know that sounds crazy, but for a while you might need to be polite like you would be with a stranger, because that politeness will then, you know, bring politeness in response, and that will improve at least the day-to-day. So be supportive. Then, whatever solutions you come up with, you have to use them every day. You can't just say, okay, here's the solution, and then forget about it. If you've decided, I have to stop being critical, then you're going to have to close your mouth or bite your tongue every time you're about to say something nasty. Just stop it. You're going to have to do whatever it takes. If you dislike her friends or his friends, you have to stop criticizing them, at least for the time being, in the way that you were doing it. Finally, you might want to actually risk some sort of change in the relationship. Sometimes moving away from the problem helps, particularly if the problem is in-laws who live close. Sometimes in-laws are the problem. Sometimes kids are the problem. Grown children who come back to the house, move back in. Most of you aren't old enough to experience that yet, but you probably will someday. The point is, whatever the problem, you have to decide, can we risk actually changing our location or changing our job? Perhaps the work is the problem. Sometimes problems at work get into the house and cause problems between the couple. Problems with friends. So you have to think, are there things that we can change that will help? What if you've never taken a vacation in 5 years? Maybe you should do that. Maybe that will help. So you need to do something different that might help the relationship. However, if in the end, that's not what I wanted to do. Oops. If in the end you've decided to end the relationship, or they've decided to end it, then you need to move on. And there are some things that we can suggest that might help. Okay. First of all, you're allowed to take some time to feel bad, to be down, to be depressed. But at some point you have to say to yourself, okay, enough, I need to get out of the house. I need to go see some friends. I need to go out. Even if I don't feel like it, I should do it because I have to get started somehow. And maybe there are some friends your significant other didn't like, and it's a good time for you to spend time with them again. That's a good thing. Go see your friends. Take time out from other relationships, other romantic relationships. It doesn't help to go from one relationship right into the next one. Many of us have made that mistake in our lives, I'm sure, but usually that relationship probably won't work because you haven't worked through the old one yet. Bolster your self-esteem. Do some things that you enjoy and that you're good at. If your partner hated skiing, for example, and you love skiing and you're good at it, go skiing. Do something that you know you're good at, or pick up old hobbies that that person didn't have any interest in and enjoy yourself. Do some things that are fun and make you feel good about yourself. You might want to get rid of uncomfortable symbols, and that means photos, letters, other mementos, and if you're not quite ready to get rid of them, pack them up in a box and put them away. For now, maybe someday you'll be ready to look at them again, maybe not. Either way, get rid of them. Some people are more serious about this than others. My husband and I used to do, we still sometimes do a bonfire, where we invite our friends over. We have a big pasture. And we invite our friends over and say, bring something that represents something you want to get rid of. So people might write something on a piece of paper like, I want to get rid of my bad habit of smoking. They might write it down, throw it in the fire. They don't have to share, but they might. Or they might, I had one guy just throw a pack of cigarettes in the fire and said, I want to quit smoking. All right? One woman brought a wedding dress. Now most women, you know what wedding dresses are made of. Nylon, acetate, lace, other stuff that goes up quick, right? And she said, I'm going to throw this wedding dress in the fire. And she's been divorced for years, and we said, no, don't do that. She had 3 daughters. Save it for one of your daughters. Or put it on consignment. She said, no, this has to go up. So she took it and threw the whole thing in the fire. The fire went sky high. Pretty soon we had neighbors coming down saying, we were going to call the fire department, but I guess it's okay. And we asked her, why did you feel you had to do that? She said, I just had to. It was the only way I could truly move on. Okay. So some people take it very literally. The next thing is seek support. Seek support from friends that you feel comfortable talking to. You don't need to talk to everybody about it, but talk to someone you feel close to. And by the way, if you're one of those friends, might have to listen to the same story for quite a while. And the long version will be the story you listen to at first for a while. Then it'll get shorter and shorter and shorter. As you watch it or listen to it get shorter, you will know that person is making progress. So, for example, they start out with a story that lasts 2 hours to tell you. And then every time you see that person, they talk for an hour about it or a half hour. The point is, bear with it. Find out from them, do you want me to just listen or are you looking for advice? Because sometimes they just want someone to listen. If that's all they want, don't give them advice. A good sign is, though, I had a friend once who kept telling her story over and over again. We went out to dinner, ran into some people she hadn't seen for a while, and these people said, we heard you broke up with so-and-so, sorry to hear that. She said, it's okay, you know, it just was a bad match, and we're good now, it's okay. And I looked at her and I thought, wow, you're over it. Because if you can go from 2 hours of talking to, it was a bad match, you know you're good. Finally, and sometimes very hard to do, is to avoid repeating negative patterns. If there was a certain kind of person that you dated that gave you a problem, don't keep dating that kind of person. For example, if you were a guy or a girl that dated someone who always had to have several boyfriends or girlfriends at the same time, and you didn't want that, don't date that kind of person again. Don't do it. Stop yourself. Or if you're the girl that looks for the bad boy, they're fun to date, but not so great to marry, so don't do it again, right? I dated some bad boys. I didn't marry one. Good thing. Or bad girls, right? However you define that. Just keep in mind, if there are certain personality types that give you a problem, don't keep heading for that personality type, because you're going to have the same problems again. And you know what I'm talking about. All right, so those are some things you can do to get through the breakup. Now, here's the interesting thing. I did a study a long time ago about relationship breakups. It's actually my doctoral dissertation. And beware of college professors who talk about their doctoral dissertations, because they can be really boring. But I will tell you this much. I learned that no matter how the breakup went, if the person was extremely kind and caring when they broke up with the other person, or if the person was a total jerk, the whole continuum, no matter how it happened, they always felt guilty for the breakup. And that's because our culture says it is not good to break up relationships. We grew up, when we're little, we're taught to make friends, we're taught to share, to be kind, to do things for each other. But no one says, and by the way, if you someday get into a relationship you have to end, this is how you do it. No, they don't tell us that. Because it's not supposed to happen, but you know what it does? In this country alone, 50% of marriages end in divorce, and the number may be higher by now. And in part, it's because things go wrong with the marriage, but in part, you know, people stay in marriages longer too because they don't think they have any right to leave the relationship, that it's wrong. You know what? If other people are the source of your discomfort about breaking up a relationship, in other words, if you're married and your parents or your best friends or whoever is saying, you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, stick it out, and you've tried your best, you know what? They don't have to live your life, you do. They will get over it. They will get over it faster than you do. And if they don't, then they're not very supportive of you. Now, I realize things work differently in different cultures. And I'm not suggesting that all cultures should take my advice. I'm suggesting in the American culture, divorces happen. And I don't think you should end a relationship at the first sign of trouble. That would be ridiculous. But if you've tried and tried and the relationship is not working, you cannot beat yourself up for the rest of your life because it ended. And that's the thing we have to remember. It doesn't make you a failure. I have friends who've been married 15 years, they get a divorce and they say, well, my marriage was a failure. And I say, really? How long was the marriage good? Well, 12 of the 15 were pretty good. I said, then you had a successful marriage for 12 years. You are not a failure. Just because it ended doesn't mean it was a failure. And that's the thing we have to remember. All right, upside down again. Or, okay. Question response question, I think it's self-explanatory.